Welcome to the Tesseract podcast, where we unlock your power to innovate. I'm Chloe.
And I'm Dan, and we're your co-hosts. Our mission is to empower airmen, connect them to resources, and accelerate change across the Air Force logistics enterprise.
Well, welcome to the Tesseract podcast, everyone. This morning, we are hosting the HAF A4 Senior Enlisted Leader, Chief Master Sergeant Robert Berrier. Chief, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks again for having me. I'm Chief Berrier, the A4 Senior Enlisted Leader, so the Senior Enlisted Leader for the Deputy Chief of Staff, Logistics Engineering and Force Protection, Lieutenant General Tom Miller, better known as your A4. So just to give a little bit of a background, myself, I joined the Air Force in September of 98. I know, buckle up, it was a long time ago. Originally from Hawthorne, Nevada, so a super small town in northern Nevada. So for context, about 1,200 people, graduated with about 40. We had a stoplight, and it was about 80 miles to the closest Walmart. So it was a very desolate place. Sebastian Younger, in his book Tribe, mentions that most people join the Air Force either running to something or running from something, and I was doing a little bit of both. And the Air Force thought that my running was so awesome, they just sent me to another desert immediately. First duty station was Nellis Air Force Base, where I spent a couple of years. So I had a couple of deployments under my belt, regular base support type taskings. And then right around 2004, the 2T1 career field got pulled into an effort for the Air Force to backfill the Army using some joint expeditionary taskings. So that saw me and about 32 T1s head to Camp Bullis in Texas to get a couple of months worth of training, and then head to LSA Anaconda, later known as Balad, to perform convoy security for Army units moving over the road. So really unique time in our Air Force career, or my Air Force career, and especially the 2T1 community, is we had about 3 detachments that were doing the exact same mission. So Mosul, Spiker, and LSA Anaconda, so roughly 250 2T1s, total force 2T1s, supporting this mission for a couple of years before we transitioned into gun truck, or line haul. Upon my return, PCS to Kunsan, did my 12 months there, headed to Kadena afterwards. Would have loved to stay on the island for a long time, but I had a handful of other trips to the desert. So made my return to the line haul operation out of Camp Arifjan. So again, working on behalf of the Army, the 1144th Joint Logistics Task Force, distributing goods all over Iraq and in some parts of Kuwait. So again, super interesting mission. Our 2T1s did a lot of great work, put themselves in dangerous path. They weren't easy roads to operate on, but again, the 2T1s did some amazing work. So as I was getting ready to wrap my time up in Kadena, I got hit for a 365 and spent the next year working as a advisor to the Afghan Army. So again, taking a lot of those lessons learned for my multiple trips to Iraq to teach the Afghan Army how to perform logistics outside the wire. Following that, went to Ramstein, where I spent about 6 or 7 years. Really, unique opportunity or series of opportunities as I was with the 86th Vehicle Readiness Squadron, headquarters USAFE, AF Africa, and then spent the last 3 years as a career assistance advisor. Again, awesome opportunity to be really involved with the development of thousands of airmen across Ramstein. Again, just a great experience. Following my time at Ramstein, I made a pit stop at Herbert Field for about 10 months, deployed to Al Udeid, returned from the deployment, headed to JBSA, where I was the MATCHCOM functional manager at AFIMSC, so installation, trailing off. Yeah. So went to JBSA to be the MFM at IMSC. So did that for a couple years. Again, awesome opportunity to be really involved with the development of our 2T1s, the employment of our 2T1s, and really got my feet wet on the operational and strategic impacts of what our 2T1s do. And I really enjoyed that. So when the opportunity to throw my name in the hat for the career field management position opened up, I jumped at it. And then October of 21, made my trip to the Pentagon, where I served as the 2T1 CFM for a couple years. And that led me to the current opportunity that I have now, right, which is the A4 SEL. So again, it's been an awesome ride for the last 26 years, a series of really unique assignments. I had the front row to see legitimate impacts that our 2T1s, our traffic managers, our material managers, our vehicle management folks make across our Air Force, and all of that kind of helped inform the things that I do today as the A4SEL. Again, the things that we do for the A4, the impact the A4 has across the Air Force, it's mind-boggling. The 4 directorates that we have and the impact they have as far as OT&E for 54% of our enlisted Air Force is nothing short of amazing. I'm really fortunate that I get to be a part of a just phenomenal team of hand-selected professionals that are committed to making our Air Force a better place and really taking care of our airmen. So, I'd like to say bluff, but there was no bottom line up front. It was just me really, spouting off in it. But again, really appreciate the opportunity to come out here today and, talk to the Tesseract team.
So all of our listeners that are, involved with the Air Force, so they're the military in general, active duty, or civilian or anybody who's involved, they understand kind of the role of an SEL, right? A senior enlisted leader, and they've interacted with one at whatever level they're at, whether it's the squadron or the group or the wing. And so would you be able to tell us a little bit about how the A4 SEL position differs kind of from the roles that our listeners have interacted with?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things is, there are parallels, right? Senior enlisted do some of the same things regardless of the levels they set at. I think for us in a very strategic position, one of the roles of the senior enlisted leader is not just SEL, but it's SEA, right? Senior enlisted advisor. So having the ear of a lot of the general officers, a lot of our senior officers or senior civilians, and definitely our senior enlisted is really important. The vantage point that I have in the meetings that I get to sit in, we continually have opportunities to plug ourselves in. The A4 provides so many critical functions, and being able to either redirect work or answer on behalf of a question that comes up, because again, the A4 is such a broad range of things, and there are a lot of assumptions about what we touch and what we don't touch. But being in the SEL position, I have the opportunity to kind of run interference or redirect as needed. One of the really, fascinating things about the A4 SEL position is you are in such a talent-rich environment that it's almost intimidating a little bit. So you really have to have a little bit of imposter syndrome when you're, sitting in this seat. Being humble, being able to, lean on your fellow senior enlisted, your fellow chiefs, your senior master sergeant FAMs, your folks that are working policy on the divisions. Like it's really important to not answer on behalf of them, but seek their feedback and seek their advice just as much as they may seek yours. Again, kind of a unique environment. The DCS, SELs, it's more or less a newer function, to the air staff. We have full representation from the A1 to the A10 at this point, but again, it's a newer role, but again, it's really impactful, and it's really important to make sure that all of the voices for the A4 are heard at different levels, and we're carrying the message of Lieutenant General Miller and really all of the general officers that work in the A4 and all of our CFMs and functional managers, and you can run down the list of folks we got to kind of answer on behalf of. But
okay, so that's the A4 SEL position. Copy that. It's pretty similar, right? But you have a lot more that you are representing. Whereas a squadron SEL is representing their squadron. You're representing the entire A4 community. And that is 54% of the Air Force is a lot of airmen. In your 26 years of experience and your experience here with A4, Tesseract, we're on the forefront of innovation. In the A4 community. That's kind of our charge, right? Is to foster a culture of innovation in the A4. How, do you see the innovation ecosystem in the Air Force and throughout your career? And then how have you, in your different roles and throughout your career, fostered a culture of innovation? And then what kind of feedback or advice would you give to current airmen on how they can foster a culture of innovation?
That's a great question. So early in my career, and I guess maybe up into the last 5 years. Innovation was always talked about. It was always something that we did, but it was never anything that we moved out on a deliberate, sustainable effort. So like case in point at Nellis early in my career, total quality management, I think is what we did. And then, transition to Kunsan, and it was a little bit of lean, maybe some AFSO 21, and then Kadena, it was AFSO 21. But, the course offerings were, hey, once a quarter, do you have someone that you can send? But there was never really a follow-up. There was never a deliberate effort to, how does this make you a better airman? I think what we see now is we're not just teaching people about innovation. We're building an ecosystem that kind of develops project managers. And I don't think we've done a good job of that in the past for our Air Force. One of the other things I see is that we're doing this a lot earlier, which I think is important. So many of our great ideas come from our junior airmen and junior officers. But oftentimes they may not have the connective tissue to say, well, what do I do with this training? How can I fully develop this idea that we have? And, not by a fault of any unit, but sometimes those great ideas die on the vine because we haven't done a good job of, how do we link the idea to the actionable item at the tactical, operational, or strategic level? So I think that was a challenge with innovation to this point in my career, is where I see it's the Air Force has done a good job of talking about it, but we really didn't develop the linkage to make these actionable items. As we move to, a more refined ecosystem, an ecosystem that supports the ideas, I think we have airmen in the field that are they're more motivated. They see the results of the ideas that they have. And, I'll use, your guys' office as a great example. When we have the Aether Sprint, or we have, SparkWorks or AFWorks, or all of these efforts where there are tangible results, I think it provides our airmen a different reality as far as innovation is concerned, because it's a thing. It's not just, hey, this is great and it's going to look good on a 1206 or my EPB. Like, this is an actual skill that I'm going to have, that I'm going to be able to employ throughout my career, and not just employ, but develop a more advanced method of innovation. And then again, I think the Air Force has done great, but I think we're at the opportunity to do a little bit better. As far as the advice for airmen, open mouths get fed, right? If you've got ideas, share those ideas. But if you're sharing those ideas with your unit, build in the offsets. Build in, hey, this is how it's going to be sustainable, or why it's going to be sustainable. Ideas are outstanding in and of themselves. But if we don't build in, how do we pay for these things? How do we sustain these things? Where's the offset? How is this making our Air Force better, more efficient, more economic, more lethal? Then it's just ideas for ideas' sake. But, we see it in the field all the time. We have so many airmen, so many civilians, so many officers that have great ideas. But it's just connecting those concepts and building in the infrastructure to make sure that it goes from idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I couldn't foot stomp everything you said hard enough, right? We have kind of seen definitely a shift in the innovation ecosystem in the Air Force, and over the past few years. And we've seen airmen in the field have to become experts on the entire process, right? From the idea all the way to sustainment. And that is a lot of work, a lot of research on top of your current duties, right? Your AFSCs related duties. And so it is nice to see when I was in the field and then coming here, the shift to have organizations like us and AFWorks and things, right, that can help out and kind of reduce the burden on the airmen. Let them solve the problems, right? Let them come up with the ideas, and then we can help them move along the path, right? And that's not only in software or physical material innovations, but that's also in processes, right? So in theory of constraints as well.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was thinking of theory of constraints, and Chief, to your point, we have a lot of education. I think that we've delivered a lot of good education to the field, but you hit on linking that to like an action item, right? How do we get the airmen at the field level and the CGOs to take that education now and to actually go in to do something with it? that's going to help them improve their unit, their organization. And obviously on the process advancement side, that's what we're trying to take from just education into policy, into how we do business, and then the support structure to continue to have that be, inculcated across the force. So in particular, I would love to hear if you have any experience with theory of constraints in the past, and then knowing what you do about it, what your hopes are for TOC kind of in the future.
Yeah, so where I think theory of constraints differs from, say, some of our things like, again, dating myself completely, like total quality management or AFSO or lean, is that we're not just looking at, hey, this is a great idea. These are the processes behind it. These are where the processes get jammed up. This is where we fall flat or fall short. I think what we develop with TOC is a different way of thinking about problems. And it's not one that is so granular or one that just remains static. It's an ever-evolving thought process. And that's why I think it's really important that as we look at, theory of constraints, and again, I'll carry in the water for, then Major General Hurry and now Lieutenant General Hurry is, her motivation for, building in theory of constraints is it makes our logisticians, our maintainers, our munitions personnel, it makes them more agile, more lethal, more economic, and more efficient because it's developing different ways to think about problems. I think it's really important that when we are developing this method of thinking that we tack it on to our junior airmen. Because one of the things that I really struggled with throughout my career, I've struggled with the idea that innovation, whether it be TOC or any of the other programs I talk about, it's like, hey, this is reserved for a senior NCO. Well, that's great, but it doesn't really provide a foundational resource for our airmen. Like, we have to give them these tools up front. Our airmen are incredibly smart. They're motivated. They have passion, pride, and purpose, fueling what they do. And if we tack on something like theory of constraints early on in their career, we may not see the result right now, but 5 years down the road, we will definitely see the results of the good work being done by your team, by career field managers, by MAJCOM functional managers that are versed in TOC and want to have this in their communities. So again, kind of like a long answer, but I see a lot of opportunity in front of our Air Force, and I think it really starts with how we employ, a theory of constraints mindset.
Awesome. No, that's great. I think to what you're saying, the theory of constraints mindset, and how do we get it to be just a way of thinking and thinking differently, problem solving on our feet, and being able to do that not only like in a stable non-wartime environment, but also in that future, and just let it be a process that flows as we are problem solving in the field, I think is going to be really important. And those junior airmen and those NCOs, to kind of your story earlier about the NCOs being the ones that were leading these convoys, right? And having those people be the ones that are really trusted with those tools and can employ them.
And as we continue to move through concepts like, contested logistics or logistics under attack, all of those things spread out resources. And it's not like there's a windfall waiting for us at the end of the day. Like, we have a set budget. And I think airmen being able to see themselves in that budget and, hey, if I have a great idea, where can I plug it in, or where can I apply these theory of constraints concepts to an actual workable submission, and know that, hey, if it's tied to the POM, it'll be a couple years before we see something. But having that understanding now helps us so much more versus, these guys run to the finish line with this great idea and then are told like, well, we'll take it for consideration, but it's got to meet these several panels and they've got to meet these several boards, and it might get across the finish line. Again, I think it's a better understanding of the process and the opportunity for our airmen to see themselves in the process. I think it'll pay a lot of dividends for us as we, continue to advance towards, whatever the threats the Air Force faces in the future.
Absolutely. So I think all of this kind of captures, innovation has changed over the course of your career, over even just, the course of Dan and Maya's career. And it's going to continue to change. We're seeing a lot of changes in the force as a whole. In particular, would love if you could give us maybe a peek at what's coming in terms of career field consolidation, hearing some rumors of that in the field. If there's anything that you could share, would just be interesting.
Yeah, so I won't specifically talk to career fields, but I'll pass on like some of the messaging that comes from the CMSAF's office, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, our Air Force, we have to take a hard look at missions over functions. Again, like, our manpower footprint isn't going to grow. our resources aren't going to grow. So we have to find better ways to do business. So, what worked for 20 plus years in a VEO threat-based environment isn't going to be the thing that works for us down the road. Again, we have incredibly dynamic, smart, educated, motivated airmen who are okay with doing missions that are either adjacent or similar to the things that they already do. Going back to my experience in, Iraq and Afghanistan, when we looked at, well, hey, I'm a 2T1, but I'm being asked to be a 50 cal gunner, right? That's not necessarily ACE. It's a add-on capability, but it's one that was well within reason of our 2T1s to do. And I think every deployment we have, and again, it's not a new concept. Every deployment someone goes on, you have someone who's doing 2 or 3 things that may not be similar to the things that they do at home. And those airmen aren't generally like, this is the worst thing in the world. A lot of them are motivated by the challenge. And I think that's what we see with a lot of our newer constructs. And when we get excited about the ideas of, ACE and MCA or MRA to support ACE. And I think it's important that we really understand that message, missions over functions. But on the back end, a lot of homework has to go into that because it's very easy to say, well, let's merge, a career field. Well, there has to be an understanding of, technical training and, how do we change this administratively? How do we change it functionally? How do we ensure that there are no second or third tier impacts that are really going to, degrade the capabilities of our airmen? But my confidence is really high because we have so many amazing career field managers, across the A4 that are taking a hard look at how do we improve I've said it several times already, the efficiency, the economy, the lethality of our airmen, and they're getting there. They've done the homework, and I think we'll see great things, in the near future. They're going to lend to career fields looking a little bit different and a whole lot more capable to tackle the threats that we're going to face tomorrow.
And thank you for the little peek behind the curtain and just relaying that message. We definitely see that mission over function in the work that we're doing every day, right? And the airmen out in the field that are taking on additional duties now to get after innovation and solving problems. I think I'd love to just challenge the field a little bit further and as we go through these processes, right? Like our CFMs and MFMs are doing a lot of this homework and thinking through the problem. And it's a large scope. If you have feedback, right? Reach out, right? Like don't just stay in your unit and talk about how you don't think something is right? Everybody wants feedback and they want to hear. And so if you think you see something that maybe somebody else isn't, bring it up, right? We'll have that conversation.
Yep. So one thing I'll add, and just kind of to talk to the function piece, just as I kind of continue to think through it, we talk a lot about mergers, but the dovetail of that conversation is like, well, what AFSCs do we need that we don't have? And that's one of the things that I think gets really, because again, the idea of merging an AFSC is an emotional thing, right? In and of itself, it's an emotional thing. But the idea that, well, what does a logistics innovation AFSC, like, is that a thing that we might need? And absolutely, that might be a thing that we need. So if we have airmen in the field that think this is, I've got an idea, not necessarily a problem, but I've got an idea, let me share that. But inversely, if I have a problem, well, let me come with a solution versus just the problem, because that's what we're seeking. Like our career field managers, our MAJCOM functional managers, our folks that are working policy and OT on the HAF, they're professional critical thinkers. They're professional problem solvers. But again, they're not going to see everything. So again, if there's something out there, by all means, again, open mouths get fed. So share that, and if it's a nothing burger, right, then that'll be it. But if it's something that we can move out on, or something that we can start to move out, then we need to hear that from them.
Absolutely. I think we'll roll into some rapid fire questions that we love to dish out to everyone on the podcast, and then we'll give you a little time to leave the field with something. So we'll start off here. So if you were an Avenger, who would you be?
An Avenger, who would I be? Can I not pick an Avenger? Can I just pick like someone in the Marvel universe?
That's fine.
Tesseract. I guess I'll pick Avengers. I'll do.
Most Marvel characters are Avengers.
Eventually, at some point, right? Yeah. I think Hawkeye. Well, I'm not gonna. Let me finish. Is the most worthless of the Avengers. Like. because like, I mean, I got it. He's great at what he does, and that's awesome. But you know, I mean, probably most people like the Hulk, right? Because I would definitely take the Hulk, not just for like the things that he can do, right? Like Hulk doctrine, right? Like he's only as strong as like the thing that hits him. So he's ever growing and ever evolving. And it's not anything to really talk about with the Hulk. And again, my comic book nerddom is kind of coming out a little bit. But again, just the continual evolution of like what the Incredible Hulk looks like, that would be my Avenger.
Hulk doctrine is a new one.
Yeah.
I think, we'll have to bring that over.
That's going to be the new, that's going to be the unofficial A4 Hulk doctrine.
There you go. Favorite musical instrument?
Oh, you know, I love metal. I love, you know, hardcore, like loud and fast, even like, you know, from the time I was an A1C to a chief as like driving to work, like I get fired up. So like when I'm on the 95 on the bus and I see like the top of the Air Force Memorial, you know, I throw some Hatebreed on and I get like mentally set. So I'd say the drums, because like I said, drums lead, right? They set the tone for everything. So that's what I'd be.
Awesome. Yeah. And we've all seen the intro to Iron Man, right? With the AC/DC blaring in the background. Right. So we know, yeah, from your iPhone or Android?
iPhone. So you know, the whole family has the iPhone, right? And if I'm shooting off a message to my extended family and it doesn't come up in the same color, I'm going to get ignored. So, you know, and again, the wife, she's an iPhone advocate. So, you know, we'll stick with the iPhones.
Okay. Star Trek or Star Wars?
Oh man, Star Trek. So I grew up, my mom was a big Trekkie. So like Star Trek Enterprise was, and then like Deep Space Nine, not the movies, like I haven't gotten into them, but I'm a Star Trek guy more than a Star Wars guy.
Okay. The new series are great. The Discovery, and I've watched them all. Yeah. You're going on vacation with your family. Where are you going?
Well, so it depends on who's the decision maker, right? So like as I have this conversation with my 7-year-old, like his ideas of vacation are a little bit different than mine. So I think he saw, yeah, absolutely. He's like he's a Disney guy. So again, I'll have to bend towards the 7-year-old and give him like voting rights. So it'd probably have to be Disney.
Copy that. What is your favorite holiday movie?
Favorite holiday movie. So this is again a conversation in my household. So it's very, very Christmas oriented. So I think they would say like Home Alone 2. I'm kind of a Home Alone 1 guy, but on the flip side, Die Hard, right? Like I don't think that's.
And then what is your superpower?
Superpower. Golly. I'd love to say flying, but I think that's probably the answer that everyone has or some people have, but I would say that flying, right? Can I ask you guys one?
Sure.
All right. So if you guys could be any animal, what would you be and why?
Oh, I think I'd be my dog because she's so loved. This is super cheesy, and she's happy all the time. So
I think I'd be a reintroduced wolf in the national parks, right? Because imagine just roaming the national parks for all day. That sounds pretty great.
So when I was a career assistance advisor at Ramstein, we'd always ask that question. We do like a mock board at the end of FTAC, and we'd ask airmen like, what would they be and why? And same thing, like a lot of our, you know, younger airmen would say, you know, I want to be a bird, right? But some of our more mature airmen would say, well, I want to be a bear, a dog, or, you know, because that was always like, you know, the divide. But at the end, we'd say, all right, so picture yourself like getting ready to roll out of the back of a 130 as whatever animal you're going to be, what's your war cry going to be? And again, it's geared towards like testing someone's, you know, military bearing, but you'd have like the most phenomenal sounds because some would be like just screaming at the top of their lungs and be like, I picked an octopus and here's like what an octopus sounds like to me. But as a CA, again, at Ramstein, as I'm walking through the BX with my family or whatever, I'd hear airmen be like, hey, again, I was a senior master sergeant at the time. They'd yell out my name and then follow up with their war cries, whatever animal they were. So yeah, I figured I'd ask you guys one I don't know if anyone's done that, but yeah, I mean.
Thank you for not making us do the war cries. I was game planning in my head though.
I was really close, but I was like, let me keep it on the up and up.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd love to kind of finish the podcast and just give you a platform to address the field if there's anything else that you wanted to reach out.
So one of the things I'll say is, our Air Force is, we're working through some significant changes. We have, new commands standing up that are geared towards making our airmen better, right? Making sure that we're able to tackle tomorrow's fights. We all have emotional attachment to the things that we do. And as those things start to change, I think, one of the pieces of advice that we've, handed out the most is just breathe through your nose, right? Like, our Air Force is going to continue to be great. And by great, I mean it's the greatest Air Force the world has ever seen. And it's not just great now. It's always been the greatest Air Force, and it's going to continue to be the greatest Air Force. So as we work through these changes, understand that it will continue to make our Air Force a better place. Not just for us, because, again, eventually our expiration date's going to come, and we're going to have to take the uniform off. But it's going to leave behind, generations of airmen that are more capable, more advanced, and ready for the fights that tomorrow are going to bring. So, and then with that, I'd say enjoy it, right? Like, this is awesome. Like, if you're only going to do like 4 years or 40 years, like, this is an exciting time to be an airman. It's an exciting time to be in the Air Force, and really just enjoy what you do and take advantage of all the opportunities you have in front of you. It's a fun time to be an airman.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chief Berrier. We really appreciate you being on the podcast, and close it out from here.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Any references to trademarked, copyrighted, or protected products or services, such as books, movies, or businesses, are used here for the limited purposes of educational and professional development of Air Force Airmen. If you have any questions, please contact us at www.tesseract.af.mil. God, I messed it up at the end.